Very good evening to you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on Global Television. This is the live broadcast of Big Talk. We'll come to you tonight from Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I'm Muyi Agumofegbe. Tonight, two issues are right in front of us. The first is the issue of the national minimum wage, which has been a dialogue that spans several weeks. And as it stands today, that issue still has not seen closure. Just on Tuesday, to bring you to speed real quick, the Federal Executive Council had stepped down a memo regarding this issue. Again, another development that has irked the leadership of the organized labor, saying that it doesn't show commitment on the part of government. As a matter of fact, the leadership of the labor believes that the government should have resolved this issue much earlier. Besides, labor says it continues to insist on 250,000 naira minimum wage going forward. However, that again has become a divisive component in this narrative because on the one hand, state governors are saying they can't pay beyond 57,000 naira, even though the organized private sector had also said, to the extent that the federal government has put on the table a 62,000 naira offer, they will also fly with that. But again, that creates a lot of a lot of divergence in this regard. So question is, at what point will there be some sort of resolution in this regard? Plus, the Labour is also asking the federal government to ensure that it doesn't send this memo to the National Assembly until all of the knotty issues have been resolved. In the meantime, it also goes to show that the Tripartite Committee has a lot of work still right in front of it. Is it still realistic now to say that the federal government, when it's all said and done, will offer something more significant beyond 62,000 there? Well, fingers are crossed. Second issue we're looking at tonight is the meeting, of course, the one that's now known as the closed-door meeting between the leadership of the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, and the federal government that ran into late night yesterday. Now, some good news coming from that direction, because we're hearing now that the federal government and the leadership of ASU have agreed to, going forward, work things out amicably. Again, this is not the first time the government and the leadership of the lecturers would resolve to resort to amicable approach to resolving their issues. Recall in 2009, that was one strike that took virtually one academic session from the calendar in this country. But then it is 1.5 decades down the line, the same narrative essentially is still spinning. So tonight we'll go big on these two issues. You meet my guests right after this short break. We encourage you to stay with us. Tonight we'll be engaging Silvanus Okpe. He's an author, good governance and electoral reform advocate. He's the author of Africa Without Politics. Silvanus, I can't say thank you enough for deciding to do this with us tonight.
I appreciate it.
Great. I know you have been very keen too to see how it will turn out between the organized labor and the federal government. At this point, I'm going to ask you pointedly, is it unrealistic for labor to continue to insist on 250,000 naira minimum wage?
Well, as a Nigerian, I go to market every day.
Right.
I pay for services. I know that the prices of these things have skyrocketed. But what are the causes of this? The federal government wants to sanitize, to build a robust economy. And this has come at a price to occasion some discomforts. And one of these is this minimum wage we are discussing today.
Right.
So I will not tell you that it is not right for labor, for the organized labor, to ask for an upward review of the minimum wage.
And the government has said in that regard, we're putting 62,000 naira.
That is where the government has shown commitment to also discuss sincerely an upward review of the current minimum wage, which is 30,000 naira.
Right.
And again, what I want the labor, the organized labor, if I were to advise them to do, is to peg their demand within a workable range. It's not just to agree to sign off on a bogus amount. What is the sustainability of the amount?
Can government pay?
That is what we are discussing. And not just the federal government. We are talking of state governments. We are talking of the private sector. I come from Benue State. In the previous administration, my state was highly reputed for the previous administration owing salaries, even to the tune of up to 300 and something billion naira. He didn't pay at a point for over 10 months. We are happy that the current administration came and they have been consistent with payment. And if you go home, like I was in the village recently, you see smiles on the faces of pensioners and smiles on the faces of workers. In fact, there are complaints that pensioners are now snatching the girlfriends of youths in Benue State because they are getting regular payment.
Because their pockets are swollen.
Yes. But the issue is, I don't speak for Benue State government. I'm not an aide of the governor. But will he be able to continue to sustain the regular and prompt payment if this is increased to 250,000 naira? Will workers prefer that bogus amount is announced, signed into law, and governors owe for several months as before? Because under the previous administration in my state, there were deaths, as little as malaria and other illnesses kill pensioners and workers. They don't have monies to treat themselves. But now, at least even if it's not much, it's consistent. I'm on the side of workers. But what I'm saying is, let it be realistic. Up to this point, many governors have not even implemented the 30,000 minimum wage
They're still
since
doing
2018. Yes. So if we increase to this 250,000, how will these governors who are yet to implement 30,000 naira do it? Is it realistic? It is not. Is 60,000 being proposed realistic? It is. Will it to an extent solve the problem and enable workers to meet basic needs? It might. But we want a realistic review, a realistic demand that if government signs off on it, it will be able to be carried, all the institutions and sectors that are concerned, the private sector, the state government and the federal government will be able to pay consistently without stress. That is what we are.
Interesting. You see, I think for the most part, we have had this conversation just from the standpoint of the federal government alone, forgetting that the states are there, the subnationals, and then, of course, the organized private sector as well. We can even hear some senators now, some ministers saying they can't afford to pay their drivers and other aides 100,000, even if the federal government were to offer 100,000. Let's talk about state governments, because there appears to be a lot of disparity on that front. Edo State government is already paying 70,000 as we speak. We know a few other states that are paying 40,000. Imo, for example, is paying 40,000. Kwara is doing the same. A couple of other states across the country. Senior lawyer Femi Falana says state governments can pay 250,000 if they have the willpower. How would you respond to that?
Well, you have to look at the minimum wage, the wage bill of states. Like Benue State is a civil service state.
Right.
We don't have institutions. We produce nothing. We depend mostly on what is coming from the federal government.
The food basket of the nation is beginning to get depleted because of insecurity.
Yes. Okay, so how does the man pay 250,000 naira? What is the wage bill? We are talking of billions of naira. If you want governors to be able to pay 250,000, then we'll end up electing governors that come on board just to pay salaries.
Without development?
Without development, nothing will happen. Their main assignment and what we elect them to do is to come and pay salaries, which will be very bad for the states. It will be very bad for our economy. It will be very bad for the development of the country as a whole, because state government will now prioritize payment of salary. And most of them, even when they don't do anything, they won't pay. They won't be able to pay it. The previous administration in my state never paid anybody salaries. There were no developments in his 8 years in office.
Interesting. But let's talk about the private sector too, because they are already challenged as it stands right now, given the economic realities, the hardship that Nigerians are dealing with generally. The private sector appears to be doing a lot of work too, because, I mean, it was interesting when they said if the federal government has offered 62,000 and Labour accepts it, they will come on board as well. But with the reality on the ground now, I mean, with Labour saying no, I mean, it is 250,000 or nothing else, how does that impact the private sector?
Look at what will happen. This will be the resultant effect of labor insisting on 250. Even this 62,000, there will be massive retrenchment of workers by the organized. Yes, private sector. I know this because most of these private institutions with you have your cleaners getting 62,000 at the minimum,
right,
and other people. How will they cope? What is the revenue that they generate in those places to be able to keep up with that wage bill? So one, it will further stress the labor market because massive retrenchment of workers, which will add to the already skyrocketing unemployment rate in the country. And then even the 62,000 will not still be realistic. You see, many private sectors owe people 5 months, 6 months on this current minimum wage. And what will happen when we go into 62,000? And think if you put all these things down on a scale of preference, and you see what you choose, that we have workers doing their jobs and earning consistently, sustainable minimum wage bill, than that we have something bogus and workers are retrenched. Let there be a fair sharing of the economy. Let the economy rotate. Let the salaries get to almost everybody. If you say 250, you might witness 80% of people being weeded out of this job sector, the workforce.
Right.
And then you have only 20% enjoying. The 80%, this constitutes a lot of crime. It makes it vulnerable. And our security institutions are already stressed. So I believe that workers should also look into all the pros and cons of their demand and see reasons why they should come to a balance and an agreement with everybody involved in this discussion and seek solutions that are sustainable.
There's the argument by Labour too. I mean, one of the planks of their argument is that fuel was selling for something in the neighborhood of 200 naira, and all of a sudden it jumped to about 700 naira, which is well over 200% increase, if you look at it. And they're also saying, why isn't government increasing salary at that level? I mean, within that margin as well. Then there are people who say, well, maybe 100,000 will be fine, minimum wage across board. But then government also is looking beyond minimum wage, because government is saying that by the time you say minimum wage, which is the baseline salary, is, for example, 100,000, you have to factor that into what they call consequential adjustment for every other level above the entry level into the workforce and things like that. From where you sit now, from what you know as a Nigerian who lives in Nigeria, what do you think should be the minimum wage right now?
You know, the tripartite committee, they have a lot of job to do, as you rightly said. The governors have said the states should be allowed to pay according to what they can do, what they can afford. You know, that's what the southern governors said. You know, that was when they came out of their closed door meeting.
Right.
But the thing is, it's not something I can just sit here and say, because there are factors you have to put into consideration before you arrive at a figure, so that this figure will be sustainable. What I am stressing on is sustainability of whatever figure that we agree on. States are not even paying 30,000 now. Many states have not implemented the 30,000 minimum wage of 2018. So even the 60,000 naira, how will they implement them? I'm telling you that most states will start owing. I just used my governor as an example, that he has been paying consistently since he assumed office. We have not had it like that since the return to democratic rule in 1999 in Benue State. So if this is taken beyond his reach, how will he be able to keep up with it? And we have seen the impact of constant, regular and prompt payment of salary on the workforce in Benue State and the pensioners, and we have seen them going without salary for 12 months and how they died, most of them. The resultant effect is gory. You cannot sit here, you cannot even imagine it. So what I want to advise that we do is that we agree on something that is sustainable. Something that across board. The organized private sector will pay without stress, without retrenchment of workers. There are no jobs. Graduates turning out of the university every year without jobs. Look at how crime the rate of crime is increasing in the streets. Yahoo is taking over because these people are stressed. They are fresh blood full of energy, but there are no jobs. So if you now come up with a policy that further reduces the workforce, even those who are already working will be retrenched, it becomes so bad for the country and for the economy. It deals with our very foundations as a nation. And that's why this issue is very sensitive. And Labour must be patriotic enough to look beyond immediate gains, to weigh what they are demanding and know that these things, whether they are sustainable or not, they must weigh it.
There have also been concerns around the governor not being sincere with regards to this conversation around the minimum wage. For example, fuel subsidy was removed since May. It's been a year and counting since that happened. And we understand that allocations to states have increased significantly. Yes. We haven't seen much of that reflecting the lives of people across the states generally, even though we know there could be a pocket of states doing substantially well in terms of how much of value they add to the lives of their people. When we look at all of this, is it not still possible for states to do a significant upward review of salaries instead of complaining to say we don't have money? No state has ever said they had money.
You know, I agree with you. That's why I said I sympathize with the organized labor.
Right.
There should be an increased upward review of the minimum wage.
But it has to be within the limits of what can be sustained.
What can be sustained. Like if you come to my, like what I have been consistent in saying this, that my governor since coming to power is 1 year, he has not owed it for a month. We didn't know this was possible in my state. That's why people call him, you say he runs a miracle economy. And while he's paying, he's also working. You see development strides, Macaulay everywhere. I've never seen my state since I knew something as a human. I have not seen my state undergo such aggressive infrastructural development all over the state. And at the same time, salaries are promptly and regularly paid. That is where that fuel subsidy that was removed and increased budgetary allocation. That is where it's going to. And the second thing we must know as Nigerians is that it boils down to the leadership. It boils down to the leadership. There are people, even if you give them 200 billion every month, it will not reflect on the lives of anybody around them, not to talk of the state in general. It boils down to leadership. You know, so while some states are already enjoying this increased budgetary allocation, some are not. It boils down to leadership, and it boils down to what these states, the pressing need of the state, the money available to be disbursed. And most of these governors inherited humongous debt from their predecessors.
Your governor was complaining again this week.
300 and something billions from the previous administration.
His predecessor has also come out to counter him to say, why you're accusing me of having mismanaged almost 400 billion, you also should tell the states, show the states paperwork of how much allocations you have received in the last 1 year.
You know, these are political talks. I don't want to dabble into them because I'm not briefed on those matters. But I know that if you weigh what the previous governor has done in 8 years and what this man has done in 1 year, we feel the presence of governance more under 1 year of governor earlier. And you know that the Bible is clear that when the righteous is in power, the people rejoice. And we are rejoicing now. Otom under 8 years did nothing for my people. I don't know about how he ran the economy or how he managed but I know that there was no significant
impact. Some people say insecurity hampered his intentions.
There is insecurity everywhere in Nigeria. People who will work. As we speak today, there is insecurity in Benue. People are being killed. We can't go to farms. This has continued to happen in the state. But the previous administration deceived people. He comes on air, he shouts, the defender of Benue Valley, he used it to secure a second term, whereas there was no significant improvement in the lives of the people. Pensioners are dying like chickens. As little as some of them cannot even afford paracetamol. But this administration, I tell you, pensioners are snatching girlfriends of people. If you look at them, they are full of life. That is what this man has injected into the workforce in this state. Prompt and regular payment of salary. Prompt and regular payment. And this is better. Every worker will tell you they prefer to get it daily, monthly, than you give them bogus amount and end up paying once in a year.
Nobody they keep coming to the street to protest and carry placards. But as we wrap up this first discussion, let's talk about the length of time it has taken to resolve this national minimum wage debacle, as it now seems?
It has taken unnecessarily
too
long.
What are some practical steps that must be taken to speed things up a little?
I think, why it is taking this long is that it involves a lot of sectors, the federal government, the state government, the organized private sector, for you to reach a minimum wage bill that will be implementable.
Yes.
You need to carry all these sectors along. The federal government cannot go and say, okay, we agree, we will pay 250. If they pay, states will not. Some of them will say, no, we do not agree with you, we cannot pay. That's why they are lying for discussion. That is democracy at work. These people will discuss, agree. These people will discuss, agree. There must be a consensus around these issues.
All right, we're taking a quick break, everyone. We need to talk about the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, in light of the warning strike it had presented to Nigerians and indeed the government. However, just yesterday, there was a meeting that ran into the night, and we understand at the end of it, ASUU and the federal government had agreed that all parties involved will work towards an amicable resolution of these issues. We'll talk to you about those issues and what is likely going to happen going forward, but that will be behind this short break. Do stay with us.
Are you ready to be entertained like never before? Get ready to dive into the latest and greatest entertainment news in lifestyle, music, movies, birthday celebration, and so much more, all on Entertainment Circle on Global Television. From the hottest red carpet events to exclusive interviews with your favorite stars, we've got you covered. Stay up to date with the latest trends and news from the entertainment world, all in one place. Tune in every Saturday by 1 p.m. with Chong Animal Joseph on Global Television.
In an ever-busy world, the increasing challenge of keeping track of health matters can be extremely demanding. Follow the latest health tips and trends on Health Guide on Global Television on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Health Guide on Global Television. Put your health first.
Just while we have been here dealing with the issue of minimum wage, then you realize that ASUU also had to state its own. Our people say you have to put close to the fire the part of your body that hurts. ASUU is probably trying to send a message to the government to say, look, while the issues around minimum wage are very salient, and I mean, of course, we can't overemphasize them, you must also realize that we have some unfinished business that has been running for a long time, and we understand some of the elements in whatever issues the leadership of ASUU is trying to resolve with the federal government dates as far back as 2009, because I remember that strike from 2009. Would you say ASUU is trying to take advantage of the heat, as it were?
Anyone who passed through our public institutions, the tertiary institutions, will appreciate the consistency, the tenacity, and the doggedness of ASUU in trying to improve the conditions of these schools. And if you look at it, it has been through this method of strikes that they always secure government interventions. But it's unfortunate that we have not had sincere leaders who will reach an agreement with ASUU and keep to them. And while this is happening, I am of the opinion that ASUU must try to find an alternative to strikes. It has not done us well.
Is that realistic, given the issues?
That's the issue. That's the issue. But they must work around it. We cannot keep going off the campuses for a long time, sometimes even 1 year, sometimes 9 months. What impact has this had on the students themselves? You see the kind of society we live in now, Yahoo, before you know, they will go to this one and is not what should be happening all the time in Nigeria. Any small disagreement, you go on strike. But that does not mean that the federal government are not obliged to keep to their own side of the bargain. If you've reached an agreement with an institution like ASUU, you must try your best to keep to your own end of the discussion, of the agreement. And that's what the federal government has failed to do since 2009. This is long overdue. And we know that Mr. President will try his best to look into it and to make sure that he forestalls any disturbances in the academic session.
As it stands right now, people say nothing much has changed between, the last 20 years of several strikes. We have seen, in some cases, within one academic session, ASUU would have gone on strike at least 2 times. What exactly, because when you say ASUU needs to work around it, find alternatives to strike, I've spoken to some of the leaders of ASUU, and what they always say is that the Nigerian government is wired, administration after administration, in such a way that the only language they seem to understand is strike. Therefore, what kind of alternatives are you recommending?
This involves a lot of discussion amongst themselves.
Within the leadership
of ASUU. To come up with things, potent alternatives that will drive home the required success. Okay, look at what we are discussing. 2009 strike came up with this agreement that up to today has not been implemented. So what was the effect of the strike itself? If they are wired to listen to strike, what has the strike benefited ASUU and students of 2009? The subsequent strikes to ensure that this agreement of 2009 that is implemented, what has it benefited?
Interesting. I want us to look at the argument some analysts have propounded. They say one of the challenges we have that have resulted in these incessant strikes and back and forth between government and the leadership of the academic, the lecturers, is that every time the aspects that have to do with the welfare of the lecturers are addressed, at least in parts, they go back to class, forgetting that there are other issues that are systemic in nature. Is there any truth in that?
But it's very true. It's very true to a large extent, because we see that they become more serious when it has to do with salaries and the rest, like when the issue of IPPIS came out, and we saw how they were consistent about saying all these things, and when it was made, they went back to class. But must it be like that? Must we remain going to strike to drive down, to tell the government to pay salaries? These are obligations the government must meet. And I blame the leadership of the country. The leadership under those administrations under whose watch this has continued to persist. It's not entirely an ASUU problem. If you check the institutions abroad, the tertiary institutions, is this what happens there? Do they need to go on strike every now and then to let the government know the right thing to do? But the case in Nigeria is that even the leadership, administration after administration, keeps failing in showing the sincerity to entrench quality leadership and to do the right thing. And that is what ASUU must concentrate on. That is why during elections, I told someone, I said this somewhere, every sector should play a role in ensuring that the right person, we should read the blueprints of these people. We should know the people with the right ideology to make sure that all these things are sorted once and for all. But when election comes, everybody is nonchalant, ASUU doesn't want to involve the organized labor and the rest, and we give room for the bad people to emerge. And when these bad people emerge, we go back to square one, going on strikes since 19 what? And we keep going without result. We only stop when they pay salaries and we go back to class. Next 2-3 years, we remember that agreement has not been made. Look at what we are saying. 2009 agreement. Do you know how many times we've gone on strike for that agreement?
In the last 15 years.
For that agreement. So how long will we continue like that? What is the permanent solution? That's what ASUU should do. We challenge ASUU to come up with a permanent solution to these incessant strikes. It has not done good to the students. You cut the academic sessions short, abruptly. And then these people go back, so they engage in many things, that illegal activities, which hampers growth and academic advancement. This is not the right thing. We have to look around it. We have to look for a potent solution that puts these things to permanent rest. This 2009 agreement should be put to rest. We also challenge the federal government. It's a pro-people government. And if it's a pro-people's government, it must look for a way out of this persistent problem. Tinubu is a Democrat. He's a progressive. And he has demonstrated that many times. And this is the best time for him to begin to rally around these institutions, to set Nigeria once again on the path of growth and development.
Great. But talking about development, one of the issues that ASUU has canvassed for over the years has been adequate funding, or if you like, robust funding of the Nigerian university system. We haven't seen much of that happen because, again, as we cycle back the 2009 agreement, one of the elements or components there is that government had said every other year it will make 200 billion available to the university authority. ASUU says that hasn't happened as promised. But in recent times, the government has come up with the student loan scheme. Some people say it's a step in the right direction. However, many of the senior lecturers I talked to would say government is trying to, as it were, strangle the university system. Where do you stand?
With the student loan?
Right, the idea behind it.
If, as someone who passed through public universities and who is not from a well-to-do family, I'll tell you that this is the best policy I've heard of since I started paying keen attention to national developments. This is very fantastic. Previously, we used to have a university system where if you're intelligent, it might not reflect on your grades. Because while you are intelligent, you must find a way to pay your fees. Right. And in doing that, when others are reading, you might be doing other things to source funding for your academics. Intelligent people drop out of school at different stages of their academic advancement. But this has brought a certain level of stability in our institutions. Like, education is accessible to all now. This is what resultant effect of this is development. The increase in literacy level in the country leads to development, stops crime. There are a lot of benefits from this thing, which a very sincere university don will tell you. Yes, it boils down to the society after school. If we have in Nigeria where 90%, look at the people involved in banditry and Boko Haram. These are brainwashed people, barely educated. You will not see an educated person who knows the sanctity of life take up arms and kill people like that. It is rare to see. They are rare, but the percentage would have been low. It is easy to convince these people because they are not educated.
Do you share the opinion that there's a systemic, if you like, orchestration to damage the public university system as we know it, so that, quote and unquote, traffic can be redirected to private universities, which in most cases are owned by politicians and some politically exposed people?
It's possible because if I have a child today, I want them to go to a private institution where they have undisturbed academic session, and it's almost the same price with public institutions now. I have people crying every day. They have increased school fees of virtually all the public institutions in Nigeria in the last two years. In the last 1 to 2 years, they have increased these fees, and they're almost at par with some of these private universities. And what the benefit of going to private universities is, if you are in a federal university, you might end up spending 6 years for a 4-year course. Why? Unnecessary strikes. But in a private university, 4 years is 4 years. And there are other benefits. And what we are saying might not be far from the truth. These universities are unfortunately owned up the Obas and Jos and the Articles and the rest. These are the people that own private institutions in Nigeria. And these are the people who once held the most important responsibilities to grow our own education sector. And they failed to do that. But they had the concept, they had the knowledge all this while, but refused to do it. Immediately they left office, they went and established private ones. Why didn't they bring these ideas to bear on public institutions? You begin to see conflicts of interest in our leadership. You begin to see a leadership that is not genuinely committed to the development of the country. You see, when we say these leaders, they don't know what they are doing, most of them know what they are doing. They know what they are doing. You know, Nigeria is a no man's business to these leaders. You do your 8 years, you manage, even if it's 4 years, and you leave power for another person. It doesn't matter the legacy they have left behind. And that is the one thing that has continued to kill this country. We must look at patriotism. It's the number one thing leaders must cultivate before they lead the country or lead any subnationals. Are you patriotic enough to put Nigeria first?
We need to talk about funding now, beyond ASU's strike and demonstrations and all of that. UNESCO for many years has recommended a minimum of 26% of a country's national budgets, annual budgets. In the case of Nigeria, even the immediate past Minister of Education, Dr. Adamu has said that Nigeria has never done up to 10%, which is a foul cry. While, of course, some people, particularly those in government, will argue to say UNESCO's recommendation is not the standard for us because we have our peculiar challenges, it still doesn't take away from the fact that what we make available by way of funding for education is abysmal, and you just said poor. How do we ensure government is proactive, government takes initiative in this direction without ASU having to take to the streets?
You know, Nigeria, if UNESCO is coming from a standpoint of an international organization with majority of member states being in or developed countries, you understand? Nigeria has a lot of things to do with money. Education is a very important, fundamental aspect of our national life. But there are a lot of things we must do as a country too. There are a lot of things the country has to do. So if you dedicate 26% as they recommended to education, what will you dedicate to health, infrastructural development, our roads, and the rest? So I believe that the current budgetary allocation for education is poor. But I still think that 26% is too much for a developing nation that has a lot of things to do with money. So we must find a balance. We must come to a middle on that and know what to do that is right. But another thing is, these budgetary allocations to the education sector, even as little as they may seem, are they being properly utilized for education? In the education sector, who are giving these contracts? At what rate? Are these contracts implemented? Because if you go to our institutions, you see TET fund assisted projects that are still not completed, and nobody will get punished for that. So even the small amount of money being allocated to this sector, let it be judiciously utilized. If they are judiciously utilized, I think there would have been significant improvement, more than what we have today in the education sector.
I'd like to say a big thank you to you, Comrade Stephen Also.
Thank you,
author, Good Governance and Electoral Reform Advocates, is the author of Africa Without Politics. We appreciate your time with us.
Thank you, Mr. Oy.
This is what we draw the curtains on tonight's program. Thank you everyone for watching. Tomorrow we'll go big again on another topical discussion. I'm Uyag Mofwegwe. Remember, as always, that the views of our guests are their opinions. This is Global Television. We're in Abuja, Nigeria's capital. Good night.